It's my fault, I couldn't remember which one.
Trustee Caravas and Trustee Roberts.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll take a brief reflective moment of silence, please. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I move to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. And the motion carries 6-0. Thank you. Now Sergeant Christ.
They're just, can you email?
Yeah, I saw it. Sergeant Christ will not be available tonight, but he did ask me to pass along that we do have mediation scheduled for the parties concerned with the noise from Lion's Den on Thursday of this week. So.
Very good. And we can go on to staff reports now.
You okay if we do finance first?
Sure.
Would you guys pull the screen back for me, would you like?
Yeah. Or I can get it.
I got it.
If I can remember the password.
Jeez. Thank you.
You may have it on, you know, on duplicate screen, you have an extend screen.
So good evening. Today we're going to do the monthly financial update for August 31st of 2019. So in August, our revenues was $622,220. Most of that coming into the general fund at 35%, with 25% going into the electric fund. For expenditures, we've had $675,982 that we spent in August, with most of it coming out of the general fund at 43% and 27% out of the electric fund. So this next chart shows our month revenue versus expenses for each fund. You'll notice the general fund is actually pretty high on expenses and pretty low on revenue. In the month of August, our property taxes, we've already collected most of them, so it was very low compared to the month before. So you'll see that getting a little bit lower. This next chart is going to show year-to-date revenues versus expenditures. You'll see that our revenues versus expenditures were higher in the general fund, the electric fund, the stormwater fund. So we've talked a little bit about the differences between operating revenue and expense versus capital revenue and expense. So this next chart, I want to kind of dive into this a little bit. So I broke these numbers apart. So the total of these two actually makes the chart that we just looked at. So the top chart is operating. So what we did for operating is we took out one-time revenues and expenses. So anything related to building permits or plans, one-time grants, donations, tap fees, investment fees, flood expenses, capital purchases, and debt have all been removed from that top chart. So as you can see, our operating revenue and our operating expenses are actually pretty good. Our revenues are always exceeding our expenses. Now when you look at the bottom, that's going to be our one-time revenue versus our one-time expenses. And you'll see in the general fund, they're actually pretty close. So the revenue that we have from operating can actually absorb our capital and whatever else we have in there. In our electric fund, that's gonna be our debt refunding, so that one is gonna be a little bit off. On the water fund though, and the sanitation fund, you'll see we don't have near enough revenues, one-time revenues, to pay for our one-time expenditures. And we do not have enough coming in from the operating side either to make up for that expenditure. On the stormwater fund, we've got a little bit of capital in there, and there's plenty of revenue there. And on our parks and recreation, it's kind of interesting because in the top chart, our revenue is higher than our expenses. But in the bottom chart, we don't have a lot of one-time revenues in the parks and rec fund, but we have some capital expenses. So because they're so close in the operating side, there really isn't enough that we're making to have a lot of capital expenditures in our fund without using fund balance. So the next chart,
I'm sorry.
of course.
So could you please remind me again what all of the one-time expenses are that you took out?
Of course. So I've got actually a list of them. So we took out building permits and plan fees, one-time grants, donations, cat fees, investment fees, home additions fees, non-reimbursable flood expenses, capital purchases, and debt.
Great. For the budget, would you mind kind of showing what we budgeted for those as well last year?
I can, I don't have a chart for that now.
No,
Okay, but
but
we
just for
want
the
to
budget
budget.
sessions.
Okay,
I think it would
of
be
course.
really interesting to look at it that way and see how much we actually budgeted for those categories, because I think we thought there would be, we always budget a certain number of home starts, and I don't know if I think we budgeted some for the affordable housing project this
We
year.
had for 2018, or 2019, and now we're adjusting that, and it will probably be 2020.
Yeah, I think adding the budget to that kind of look would be really helpful.
Absolutely. So do you find those charts helpful?
Yes.
Great. So next, we're gonna look at the year-to-date revenues versus the budget. Again, we're not exceeding our budget. Actually, we are exceeding our budget, there we go, on the revenue side, in the general fund and the electric fund, and that's it. Everything else is pretty close. For the expenditures, we are not exceeding our budget on any expenditures except the electric fund, and again, that's due to the refunding. We have some that are pretty close. On the year-to-date revenues, 2019 versus 2018, again, this is just another way to compare the revenues from year to year. Again, the electric fund is going to be the one that stands out here for the refunding. Everything else is pretty close. When you see the sanitation fund, that's going to be from our fee increases and the VOD increases. Everything else is pretty comparable. When we look at expenses, the general fund is actually going to be higher this year than it was in 2018. We have some additional expenses that we've got, that we've been paying out for the general fund. The electric fund, again, is the refunding. The water fund and the sanitation fund are fairly similar to the year before. We do have a little bit more in the sanitation fund. That's going to be due to the problems with our treatment plant. We have some additional expense related to the sludge hauling and outside professional services. And then when we look at our Parks and Recreation Fund, that was also higher up on 2019 versus 2018. For both the general fund and the Parks and Recreation Fund, we did some reallocation of expenses, and that's what's causing a lot of that. When we look at this for the quarter, so for the general fund, first and second quarter, the revenue exceeds expenses. For the third quarter, the expenses are actually exceeding the revenue, but we've got plenty of revenue from the first two quarters to absorb that. Then looking at the electric fund, we've got plenty of revenue in the first quarter and in the third quarter. The second quarter is pretty close. That was our refunding quarter. But we've got plenty of revenue to absorb that small deficiency there. For the water fund has higher expenses in both the first quarter and in the third quarter. And the second quarter has higher expenses or revenue, but it's not enough to absorb all of the expense.
Excuse me, Joe,
Yes, sir.
can you tell if the major influence there, yes, on this one, is timing of the accounting, or was it actual different volumes of product?
So actually, the revenues are lower than the expenses because we had debt service in both the first quarter and the third quarter. It's not necessarily due to revenue, it's more on the expense side. Expenses are really high on those two quarters.
Okay. And they're from, so those sort of one-time
Yes,
events?
it's from debt service,
So it's timing on the expense side?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then on the sanitation fund, you're gonna see higher expenses in the first quarter, second quarter. We're actually doing pretty good on the third quarter. We have more revenue than we have expense, which is unusual compared to the last couple quarters. We do have debt service in this one as well. We do have some plant challenges as well, so that's causing the expenses to be high, although our revenues are doing really good right now. The stormwater fund, stormwater has plenty of revenue to absorb all of its expenses, and in fact, we should see some more maintenance coming up this fall that will take up some of those revenues. And on the Parks and Rec fund, here, again, we're looking at them being very close, our revenue and expenses. If we were to look at this from the operating side, as we saw before, the revenue actually does exceed the operating expenses. It's gonna be the capital that's in there that's pushing those up a little bit higher. Okay, this next chart, this is my favorite chart of the night. So can you tell why? So as you look at what we received from July, we're actually looking at a really good number right there. So the amount that we received in August was $143,286 in sales tax. This is the second highest sales tax receipts in the past 3 years, so that's fantastic. The only one that was higher was September of 2017, and it was only higher by $1,500. So with the next month being our highest one typically, I would expect us to break that record, so stay tuned.
Do we think that's due to the online sales?
I do. I believe it's due to the sales tax changes that the state implemented. So this is going to be our occupancy and lodging tax. We did kind of adjust this budget so it's more of a bell curve versus being just a straight amount of budget. You are seeing the festivals coming in August, and that was from camping, so that is pushing that number up pretty high. For this line item, the budget is actually $23,000, and year-to-date is $8,275. So we're hoping to see more next month. And looking at the sanitation service charges, so the rate increase accounts for $94,000 year-to-date, so that's additional money into that fund. Additionally, the BOD surcharge is generating an additional $38,000 of revenue, which averages about $7,600 a month. Again, the commercial customers are paying about 93% of that. And that is all I have for tonight. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions? Trustee Brown?
One request, if we've gotten the report on the festivals, sales tax and incentives for the park and everything, could we get a copy of that, just by email?
I have not received that
No.
at this point. That wouldn't come to me. Kim?
I have not received it.
From Planet Bluegrass, they haven't filed it yet?
They paid for their lease agreements.
But they're supposed to submit a report with
The bid fund.
sales tax collection, but haven't got that yet? Okay. If it comes in, when it comes in, if we could get just a copy, I'd appreciate the email to see that.
So, Trustee Browning, just FYI, sales tax is protected information, so we couldn't share sales tax with you, but we could share other information that they're required to report.
They report the gross sales tax for everybody, so it's not identifiable by vendor. We got that last year, so just.
Fantastic. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
I just wanted to state that I thought these reports are the best that I've seen in the 5.5 years I've been on the Board of Trustees. They're really helpful, and I think they help us understand situation quite well, and so Joe, I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Would agree. Thank you. Next item is the update on employee versus contractor status for the Georgie. Georgie speaking to them?
Mhm. The attorneys,
Okay.
there was a question.
So I guess there was a question at a board meeting I was not at concerning kind of the research we had done into this issue on contractor versus employee distinction for members of the DOT. I know Jill has done a lot of research on the IRS side of this and what the IRS considers. My own research confirms that, well, there's not really a whole lot of certainty on this because there's a case law. Everything seems to be pointing to the fact that elected officials are considered employees for IRS purposes. When we did a call around to different municipalities about how they treat this issue, universally, everyone treats their elected officials as part-time employees. And in part because of the IRS guidance on this issue, which, really doesn't leave a lot of room to say that a public elected official, which they consider a public official, would not be an employee under the IRS regulations. And so that's kind of how we came to this distinction, or this consideration of changing the status of members of the Board of Trustees. Talking to Jill, we don't think there's going to be a huge impact, that we can kind of shift the way we treat employees in lines, or create a separate classification, so it wouldn't have much of an impact to the town. But I think we'd both be happy to answer any questions you have on this matter.
I guess my only question is, is it gonna change how we've been reporting this income on our taxes?
Yes.
So,
So you will get a W-2 versus getting a 1099, and your taxes will already have been withheld and paid to the IRS.
okay. I think it does have implications in some cases. Particularly for someone who might be employed where they have a contract and they are not allowed to have any other employment other than that primary job. So they can volunteer, but they can't be employed anywhere else. So just something to think about, that could limit who could serve down the road because of that designation. So they could be considered in violation of their employment contract. That's the only thing I can think of that could come up, that could be a problem for someone.
I mean, from a practical perspective, that's a very strict interpretation of that contract, and we can't avoid every possibility, but I mean, there may be some sort of separate agreement between the employee and the trustee and the town, saying this is employment for IRS reporting purposes only and not.
Maybe there's some way to
There's some
get
way
a letter
around
or
that.
something that they could say, it's minimal, obviously.
Correct. It's only for
Right.
tax reporting
It's
purposes
not
only.
like,
Yeah.
somebody trying to have a side job that
Correct.
takes them away from, okay. Yeah, but just, you could be asked, I guess, if someone needed some kind of letter on that.
Yeah, and I think the town would be happy to provide that kind of letter.
That would be a good way to hopefully do it. Okay.
Something else we had discussed was, because it is a minimal amount, was putting you guys on a 26 pay period year, continue to do the quarterly payments for you guys and just do the tax withholding at that time, if that would be okay.
I think it makes sense and less work for staff and less cost, because usually there's a cost per payroll. I don't know if that's how the town's contract works, but.
It is not, but
Okay.
that's okay.
Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you for following up on that. Thank you. Great. Administrator's report.
I just found out that this was not in the packet on Friday, we're not really sure why, but it was. And so, you do have a electronic copy now, but I will run through a few things. This past week, of course, was our 6th anniversary of the flood, and Governor Hickenlooper stopped by and toured our new library facility and drove around and looked at some of our projects from a resiliency perspective is what he was looking for. And so he did express that he thinks we're doing a really great job on our recovery efforts, and he really enjoyed seeing his sign. So
It's a great photo, by the way.
yeah, that was good. It's in, and there's a copy of that in your packet, I believe. Over the next 3 weekends, we're gonna be crack sealing in 3 different neighborhoods in town. So this past weekend, they started Lions Valley Park, but they did not complete. I have not heard when they're gonna pick up the last road they weren't able to get to. This coming weekend will be Stone Canyon, and then the following weekend will be Steamboat Horizon and Vasquez. So that's what's scheduled right now. We do ask people to move their vehicles off of the road on Saturday in those neighborhoods. They'll be getting door hangers as well, because that really helps us to get the road done more efficiently and completely, so that the water doesn't go into those areas that don't get it. Don't get crack sealed. We do have a representative from CDOT here tomorrow night, or tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock at the library, who's going to discuss the CDOT Access Management Plan. Anyone is invited to attend, and we have made personal phone calls to the businesses that are most likely to be affected by that. So we know it was fairly short notice, but CDOT is planning its final meetings on this the following week. And this was their availability to do something specific with Lions. So there will be an opportunity for people who can't meet tomorrow to attend the one in Longmont. I believe it's I think it's the 26th, but we can get that advertised for people who can't attend. Our water tank had its 5-year checkup inspection, and there were very minimal improvements needed. A couple having to do with winterizing, a few little areas that it is starting to show a little corrosion that they want us to get on sooner than later. So we'll be adding some items to our budget for that. Also, our bridge inspections occurred this past couple of weeks as well. These are called off-road bridge inspections, so they're not on CDOT's. They're not CDOT inventory, they're the towns. And so for us, that includes the 2nd Avenue Bridge and both of the McConnell bridges. The 2nd Avenue Bridge did have what they're calling an urgent need. And there is another pier that is corroding, and they want it repaired before the end of the year. And that's a problem because we still haven't gotten our FEMA approval. So I'm going to be letting them know our timeline with FEMA and the closure of that bridge in the hopes that they will give us an exception of some sort to not make those repairs before the end of the year. The McConnell Bridge, the new bridge, of course, was in beautiful shape. I think it was in 98 or 99 overall. And the original McConnell Bridge does have a little scour protection we need to do, which means moving some riprap up along the base of it where water affects it the most. And then we did have a visit also from our Nebraska Municipal Power Pool friends, and they are going to be offering a whole set of rebate programs free to our customers. And they will also be the ones who will be monitoring and actually doing the rebates. It's not additional work for our staff. So you're gonna see 4 different programs coming forward in our upcoming e-blasts and newsletters that residents that are on our electric system can certainly take advantage of. So watch for those. The Chamber Social on this Thursday night is the education component of that will be presented by town staff. We're going to be letting businesses know about our revolving loan funds, the tax increment financing that might be available in the downtown for projects, as well as our business recovery fund. We're hoping folks will take advantage of that. They have a balance right now available to be used. And we are also working on, DOLA is funding a project regarding Lions business recruitment. And there'll be, a task force is going to be putting together a group of people that will be spearheading that effort. So if there's someone with interest, they can certainly reach out to town staff again.
Any questions for the town administrator? Trustee Brown?
Any changes on the wastewater treatment plant, centrifuge, or?
The Wright Engineers and Ramey are working on some options while we await a resolution to the actual centrifuge and the sizing of that. They have found a unit, actually comes out of Canada, that might be able to help us in the interim. And they're willing to have it delivered here and for us to use for a few days. That will, to see if it's another option for us. And then we can kind of test the arrangement. It's called a Fournier.
Press, yeah, Fournier
Press.
press, yeah.
And so they're going to have that delivered, and we're gonna try that out in the meantime.
Hope there's no tariff on it, And secondly, you mentioned something a minute ago about the housing, fees from the housing probably occurring in 2020, so I take it that there's been extensions or something like that, because wasn't there a grant originally of December 2019?
Yes, it was. The housing division of CDBG-DR has been extended until July of next year. So that has allowed everyone to take a little breathing room, unfortunate for us, but they have extended their closing date with Mr. Bell to the end of October.
Just
But
ask.
We think that if they choose to invest in the utilities, it could be this year, it could be next, it's gonna be right on the cusp. So we're not really quite sure how that's going to come out yet. But as you know, that the plans haven't even really gone fully public yet. They're still fine tuning the electric layout, the building design. So it's possible it could happen yet this year, but it may not.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Trustee Brown. Didn't see that.
Sorry. So I actually want to follow up on that because I was going to ask us a question as well. I'm curious about the PUD approval process, and do they do a 30, 60, 90? Do we see a design plan that has to come through the board? What is that? How does that happen?
There will be, the single-family homes do not have to go through any process.
Okay.
Those are used by rights. The multifamily home will have a development agreement,
Okay.
and will have some design input that will go through planning commission, and we'll have public hearings.
So it doesn't come necessarily to the board itself?
I don't know if Greg has, wait, I saw him here. Has-
My understanding, design reviews actually end at the PCDC unless they want to appeal.
Okay.
So, yeah, to get that on the microphone for folks.
Yeah.
The design will go, could end at the planning commission if everyone is satisfied with what they're presenting, or it could be appealed to the board of trustees.
Okay. Is there any way to communicate that out so that the public knows when to attend the PCDC? Or is
It
there
hasn't
not?
been submitted yet.
We haven't even begun the process of designing development agreement because of where the project's at.
My point though is more when it comes,
Sure.
goes to the
Oh,
PCDC,
absolutely.
that there's
Absolutely.
communication on that, so planning people have the opportunity to be a part of the process. Okay, super. And then I had another question. So I had a couple of people express to me some concerns about the most western pond, that
water is going through cobble that's built around the culvert and not the culvert itself. And expressed concerns that that's not correct, or are there, you know, raising it as a concern.
The engineers are looking at that and have presented 3 options to repair that. So that is a change order that the board will be seeing here shortly.
Okay, so it's coming down the pipe. All right, that's what I needed, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, trustee Miller.
MCR? Oh, Tracy just indicated it won't have to be a change order because it is within the range of estimated changes. But they have presented 3 options for staff and our engineers to choose.
Trustee Miller?
Yeah, I just have a question about the recycling area. I've just seen a lot of comments on Facebook about it being closed early. Like it being closed at before 5, the
There was-
gates, and the gates have not been working, and
There was a transformer issue that set it off about 2 weeks ago, and they did come out and fix it. I believe, but I was away last week, it may have happened one more time last week. We are aware of it, and if it continues or becomes a problem, we'll definitely have to work with N-Line to fix it.
okay. So that's on the range of, so that's what you're looking at, you're keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, we heard about it too.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Great. Next on the agenda is actually audience business. Okay. Just make sure we didn't switch things with You're fine to stay with this. All right, this is the portion of the meeting where the audience is welcome to address the board on items that are not on tonight's agenda for a public hearing. We do not have any public hearings on tonight's agenda, so you're welcome to discuss any topic. Each person will have 4 minutes. Please give your name and address for the record. Is there a sign-up sheet for the meeting?
We have Tad Smith. Oh, we have Laverne Johnson.
Oh, Vern's coming first?
He
Okay.
he said he should
Deferred.
defer to Laverne.
Hi, Laverne Johnson, 306 Evans. And yes, the flood was 6 years ago, and we all have been talking about where we were. We had a potluck last Monday night where people told their flood stories and everything. And we wanted to say again that we give a tribute to Gerald Boland, our 30-year-old coach and teacher who lost his life. But Larry Cohan, who was in charge on his own, I think of his own flood memorial, has passed away. And he has a flood memorial on a private lot along the river, just right across from where the swinging bridge was. And I see that place is for sale. And I think it would be nice if, I know Dave talked about having a flood memorial down at Meadow Park, and maybe we could extend this memorial in some way. So I just wanted everyone to be thinking of that, because it's actually too early. His sister's out of town and everything, but it is time. We don't want someone to tear it up while we're not looking. Also, there was a big razzle-dazzle over Riverbend. Somebody walking down the river by Riverbend, and somebody come out and told her that they couldn't be parking there. And I thought that from the swimming hole. So I thought we had an arrangement where if there was a wedding, that they contact somebody of the town to tell them that they couldn't swim there. However, they weren't swimming, they were just walking down. So you may hear this, one lady, Pam Mayes, just sent it on Facebook. And I want to say that people are working on the paper to have better publicity, because we don't know anything. Don't know when the school games are or anything, and Ken Singer is trying to work with someone, and I know the town has put on some of their publicity, and so we didn't realize how important all that news was, so. Okay, I guess that's all I have. Oh, the museum closes on the 29th of January of September. It's our 40th year, and we had some very good programs, and the one where we took them up to the cemetery and gave them on a tour was really popular, so we're going to do that again. So I do want to thank the town for their support, so.
Thank you. All right.
Now, Tad Smith.
Tad Smith, 59 South Taft Street in Fort Collins. So I came for about a month ago when the board requested that the PCDC look at the tiny house ordinance, specifically the potential to allow tiny homes on R2 lots. And at that meeting, Mayor Sullivan actually made the point during the discussion that, anytime you pass novel legislation, it's likely that something's gonna come up unexpected afterwards. And I think 8 months after the ordinance passed with no tiny houses on wheels in Lyons, it's become clear that the zoning requirements of the ordinance are presenting some significant unexpected challenges. With a tiny house, it requires more level land than, say, conventional construction to set one up. And with the anchoring requirements to withstand 120-mile-per-hour winds under the ordinance, there's no way to put one, practically speaking, in the floodplain. So with very little R1 land that's level outside the floodplain, there's pretty much nowhere right now to put a tiny house on wheels, despite them being legal in the town of Lyons. There's been meaningful interest by people potentially living in tiny houses in Lyons, but to date there's been 0 applications, and I think that that's, pretty demonstrably due to the fact that there's just very few suitable locations in town. So in order to open up some more suitable locations for tiny houses on wheels, the PCDC unanimously decided to recommend that the board allow tiny houses on wheels as ADUs on R2 and R2A lots. In discussing this before, I know members of the board brought up several potential concerns around this recommendation. And I think that this proposal addresses all of those concerns by the way that it was set up. For density specifically, there's going to be no increase by allowing tiny house ADUs on R2 lots to the overall aggregate planned density of the town, because those tiny homes ADUs are subject to the same cap of 10 total for the town that any tiny house ADUs would be allowed or would be subject to on R1 lots. As far as individual lot density, because the PCD is recommending that a tiny home ADU only be allowed on an R2 or R2A lot that doesn't already have 2 units, then there's no change to planned density for those particular lots either. I know Trustee Roberts pointed out that in the last meeting when this was discussed, that because the original ordinance was set up to only allow tiny houses on wheels within R1 lots only, there was an incentivization of increased density on some of the smallest lots in town. And so by allowing 2 units, the second in the form of a tiny house ADU on an R2 lot, this change that the PCDC is recommending would at least help rebalance that incentivization slightly to put higher density on lots that are designed for higher density. As far as short-term rentals go, Trustee Browning pointed out in the last meeting that Lyons really can't afford to lose any more potential long-term rentals to Airbnb. And because the board's recommending to do this only as an ADU on a R2 property, they're incorporating by reference the town's existing ADU policy prohibition on short-term rentals for ADUs. So there's no way that this recommendation would result in any additional short-term rentals in town, because all those would be subject to the same rules that all the existing ADUs would be subject to in town. As far as utilities goes, by recommending that tiny houses on wheels be allowed as ADUs only on R2 properties, those ADUs would be subject to the same rules on R2 as they would be subject to an R1, which would mean that the town would require the ADU to be connected to the utilities of the primary dwelling there. That being said, because the PCDC is recommending that only tiny houses on wheels be allowed as ADUs and not conventional ADUs on R2 properties, this change would not permanently eliminate the ability of the town to collect connection fees as well as water rights for those properties.
I have to cut you off there, I'm sorry.
Is that 4 minutes?
We'll do the 4 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Sorry. No
Thank you
worries.
very much. They're very efficient. Anyone else for audience business? Okay, we'll close audience business, thank you very much. We will go ahead and move on to boards and commissions updates, and we are happy to have the Lions Community Foundation here for a presentation. Would you mind putting
thank you.
yours here? Yeah, if you could put the
Right here.
talk button, the little voice button.
Just a minute. He'll help you.
Turn that
I got you.
And then on the podium. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come talk about the Lions Community Foundation, what we've been doing, why we do it, and some future plans. I'm Jeannie Moore, and I'm the chairperson of the Lions Community Foundation, and we have 9 other board members who are all volunteers. We have one paid part-time position, and she is in charge of most of our communications. So any articles in the newspapers or maybe even online are submitted by Kristen Bruckner, which probably many of you know.
Who also happens to be having a birthday today. It's the
Oh,
same
that's
day.
right.
Those are
Yes.
one of the exact same day. Local trivia.
That's true.
So happy birthday.
We are a philanthropic organization. We believe in the power of connections, and we believe that we are the catalyst to connect the people in Lyons who have the means and the desire to improve the quality of life here in the town with the causes that matter to the community. We also believe together, working together, that we become kinder, stronger human beings. The members of our board, of which there are 10 of us, love living in Lyons. We love the community atmosphere. We love the natural beauty and the caring, kind people, generous people that we've come in contact with in the town. And this is why we choose to give back to the town. This is why we choose to give our time and our energy and our own financial contributions. LCF began about 12 years ago with a core group of individuals who had a common passion to improve the quality of life, build a culture of giving, and create a positive change in the Lyons community. This is still our vision today. This year, we polled many of our Lyons residents to give us feedback on specific causes that they thought were truly important to the community, that they would support through volunteerism and through their own financial offerings. They came up with 3 critical areas of focus: caring for our citizens, community connectivity, and investment in our youth. Each year, LCF provides funds through community grants to nonprofit organizations in Lyons that meet the criteria of our vision and promote a focus on one of these areas. The 2019 grant cycle is now underway. Nonprofit organizations submit applications. A review committee of interested Lyons residents who are not on the board read the applications, score them according to a rubric, and submit recommendations to the LCF board. We hold a grant recipient event in November to celebrate the organizations we've chosen to fund. We give them an opportunity to inspire us with their ideas and their plans. We take this process very seriously and give back to the community as many funds as the local businesses and individuals provide us through their donations and contributions. As you can see from the annual report, which I believe that was put in your packet, this was our 2018 annual report. We distributed $39,748 to 12 nonprofit organizations, of which $6,500 of that total was also provided to the Lyons High School for their student scholarships. Under the focus of caring for citizens, which is one of the focuses, we fund LEAF to help them provide for the food pantry, Meals on Wheels, and their client services. Under the second focus of community connectivity, we partner with the town of Lyons to provide the wonderful summer sandstone concerts, the holiday parade of lights and the fireworks, and a weed control study in our parks by a local group who have named themselves Safe, Organic, Sustainable Weeds Action Plan. In addition to our support of the town of Lyons, we have been a proud and long supporter of the Lyons Redstone Historical Museum and its many projects to grow public awareness of Lyons heritage and Lyons history. Last but not least, under community connectivity, we've helped the Lyons Arts and Humanities Commission to bring amazing outdoor art through the sculptures to our town and many other projects that they have been spearheading for the last few years. The third area of focus is youth development. We provided funds for the Lyons Elementary School garden that got started several years ago. The students collect and harvest their own seeds, grow and tend the plants in the garden, and then provide fresh organic vegetables to the town through the Lyons Food Pantry every Wednesday. Last fall, they added a honeybee colony. This week, look for a wonderful article in the Redstone Review touting the merits of this school project for our students, staff, and the community. At the high school level, LCF gave funds for the seniors after prom party and proudly awarded 6 scholarships of $1,000 each to highly deserving seniors. Our goal this year is to become more visible in the community, to bring awareness to our organization, and to engage and connect with our citizens and businesses who have the means and the desire to invest in the community through volunteerism and financial giving. LCF cannot do our work alone. We need the generosity of the community to fulfill our vision. For the last 11 years, we've held a gala and auction in November to raise funds. We've tried our best to make them as fun for the community as possible. It's always been fun to see our Lyons residents all dressed up once a year, and we've always tried to make them as enjoyable as we could possibly do. However, this year we've made a decision not to continue the gala because we are receiving feedback after 11 years that maybe it has outgrown its purpose. We also received feedback that many younger people felt it had become exclusionary and that they could not afford the price of the tickets, participate in the auction, and pay for babysitters. So for this year, we have tabled the gala in hopes of finding other ways to raise money. So this year, we are in the midst of planning more inclusive fundraising events, ones that will include as many individuals and family members as want to join in the fun. We happily and gratefully collected over $5,000 providing popcorn, cookies, and popsicles at the Sandstone concerts this summer. Finally, we will be sending out an annual appeal letter this fall to ask our citizens to invest in their community through monthly, yearly, or even one-time donations. We are hopeful that our friends and neighbors will respond generously to for us to continue our work in the community.
Thank you so much. That was very, it was a great update and great to hear kind of the direction that you're going with fundraising. And well, we all enjoyed the gala. At times I completely understand that it's not accessible to everyone potentially.
Well, it's because we could only accommodate about 180 people at the gala, it did obviously exclude some people. Of course, some people chose not to go anyway. But we feel like if we can come up with some fundraisers that are much more inclusive in the community, that people will be happier and hopefully donate to LCF.
Well, certainly the work that you do in the community is very meaningful, and particularly around the flood. I always recall how generous the foundation was and how supportive you were of everyone who was impacted by the flood, so.
Thank you.
That really goes a long way, and continue the good work.
Thank you.
So thank you so
And we
much.
hope we continue to get lots of donations so we can continue our work.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay, next up is the consent agenda. Will the clerk please read the items on consent into the record, please?
Resolution 2019-97, a resolution of the Town of Lyons approving a water lease agreement with Kirkland Construction. Resolution 2019-98, a resolution of the Town of Lyons determining that flood response and recovery for rental equipment and supplies provided by John Deere Financial were reasonable and necessary. Resolution 2019-99, a resolution of the Town of Lyons determining that flood response recovery for rental equipment repairs and services performed by Four Rivers Equipment were reasonable and necessary. Resolution 2019-100, a resolution of the Town of Lyons determining that flood response and recovery fuel tanks and supplies from Xfinity were reasonable and necessary. Resolution 2019-101, a resolution of the Town of Lyons approving the First Amendment to the construction agreement with CGRS for the Eastern Corridor Utilities, the September 3rd, 2019 Board of Trustees meeting minutes, and the September 2019 accounts payable.
Thank you. Would anyone like to pull any items from consent? I don't hear any. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
I'll move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Any further discussion? I just want to thank staff for getting to the reasonable and necessary items. I know it's really hard to get to those with all the other items that are always on the agenda.
Staff just told us there's gonna be 90, so we're gonna try to do 3 a week. 3 a meeting.
Well, those are, we know how important these are for documentation purposes, and so I'm sure it's very time consuming for staff, but it's really important to do while we have all of the collective memories engaged, so just wanted to say thanks for those.
So you're gonna see a lot of them.
Okay. And call for the vote. Okay, and the consent items are approved 6-0, thank you. So first item on general business is tiny homes. I feel like we've already had a staff presentation. But we're going to invite our chair of the CDC, Greg, I think, to come up. Anyway. While we're waiting for him to get seated, so Coco Gordon is also having a birthday today, so Coco, my other fellow sister birthday girl, happy birthday. I'm trying to think if I missed anybody. All right. I'll turn it over to you if you want to give us a...
Well, Tad pretty much covered everything, so I think I really stole my thunder. I don't have anything else to add other than, we didn't discuss the tiny homes as ADUs and R2, largely because we did ADUs probably about a year and a half before we did tiny homes. You could say it fell a little bit through the crack, but there was a little bit of a redundancy because R2 was a multifamily anyway, so the need for to cover it in ADUs or cover it in ADUs wasn't really there. I'm not sure exactly how many properties we have that are R2 zone that only have one dwelling on them. So I don't think this is a lot, but everything that Tad said was in fact correct and in agreement with what the PCDC discussed last week. I do think it's a good idea. It's something that we should have let fall through the cracks that we did, but nonetheless, I think it can be rectified by this.
Thank you. Just a quick question from process. So would this be simply just a pretty clean amendment to change the, I didn't have time to go back and look at the ordinance, but I would assume it could be a fairly simple process.
That's the understanding of staff and of the PCDC, that they could be done fairly cleanly. There's kind of accessory issues out there we need to work out, sort of around condominialization, we've talked about quite a bit recently. But we think this change in particular can be done pretty easily. You'd be an ordinance, yes. I mean, it's changing the code, so that'd be an ordinance.
Yeah.
Amendment to the ordinance.
Okay, any questions for Chair Edding, Trustee Roberts?
I tried to ask this question a month ago. What are the parameters of our water agreement with Longmont such that we can just adjust whether a CBD share is required or not for any home?
You know, that is out of the purview of PCDC, so you'd have to talk to utilities commission about that.
Surely that was considered though in deciding not to recommend requiring a connection water share.
Okay, so when we did the ADUs, the utility commission was the one that weighed in on all of the water share issues. The PCDC stayed silent on that, and that was by design.
The UED?
Yeah, whatever that one is, yeah, whatever that one is. We stayed silent on that from council and by design. But I think the feeling was, well, as soon as I said we stayed silent, I'm gonna give you an answer. Since they're the same as the ADUs, we felt it was underneath that, but if you want to take it up with the
It's in our staff memo.
Is it?
We can cover it.
Yeah, I mean, it says here that ADUs are exempt from tap and water share requirements.
In our agreement with Longmont?
Yes. As long as the main house and an ADU are not using more water than what's allowed in a year, and if they max that, it's very costly.
Very expensive.
But
So the same goes for whether it's a separate house.
well, in this case, the way that this is being looked at, it counts as a second. And so, there shouldn't be that much usage when it comes to a tiny home compared to a house, adding on to it.
But I
We
mean,
shouldn't reach that maximum.
stick-built ADU on R1 property, it has the same.
Same situation?
Right, so then why not exempt stick-built ADU on R2 or R2A property from utility connection fee as well? Why single out tiny homes?
So I could probably try to answer this, and I didn't remember that it was UEB, but I think you were right. But when we looked at, the original ADU ordinance didn't exempt it, they did have to have a tap.
That's true, we changed it.
And we did not have one application come forward because it was cost prohibitive, and when the UEB actually looked into it, our ordinance was actually the opposite of what is recommended, and almost every other ADU ordinance from every other community, they actually wanted them on the same hookup, that they didn't want them to have a separate tap. So that was why we made the change, is that we had actually found that our ordinance was designed opposite of what we were comparing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just basically followed Longmont, which seemed to be the prudent thing to do.
Yeah, I was just asking more specifically about our agreement over
With the-
water, not,
It's silent.
but, so
It's silent on it.
well, you said that it permits it, it's not that it's silent, or is it?
Oh, the actual Longmont IGA is silent. It talks about connections and the maximum amount of water that can be used.
So it's the town alliance decision on how many shares are required for how many units are on it?
It's in our code.
Okay, so it's not really tied at all to, other than just the amount of water. So then, but why do we carve out this benefit just for tiny homes on wheels? And why don't we give the same benefit of sharing utility connections with stick-built ADUs on R2 and R2A properties?
We would. We would.
They apply, the same rules apply.
If it's truly an ADU, yes, it would, the same would
And
apply.
what's the distinction between an ADU and a not ADU second house then?
You can't, on an R2?
I mean, if it's truly a second house, it would have its own utility connection, it wouldn't qualify as an ADU.
So there's really no incentive to do that at all, except for what if they're both gonna be a rental, is that?
Yeah, that's
They can
exactly
both be
it.
rented.
The big difference is for an ADU, one of them has to be owner occupied. And
it cannot be used as a short-term vacation rental. If it's a duplex and it's stick-built, then both of them can be rented out. The owner can live in California, and one or the other can be used as a short-term vacation rental. That's a big difference.
They're making income off it.
So someone who owns a house on an R2, R2A lot, who lives there, can apply for and be granted permit to build an ADU, rent it out as a separate family's home, and not be required to pay separate utility connection fees and CBT share.
As long as he's the owner of,
As long as he's the owner, or she is the owner
Yeah,
of the
or is
property.
the,
And that's
and
a-
lives in the residence.
Yes.
And that's part of 161070 as exists today, that they share the same utility connections, the principal
Right.
unit and the ADU.
But nobody is keeping track if they move away and start renting it.
Well, we try to, right, I mean, if we're aware of it, or it gets reported.
Okay.
One of the other things that came up that didn't get brought up, but you reminded me, when we did tiny homes, it was clear that the property tax of that property was not gonna change if a tiny home went on, because I don't think they know how to assess the value of a tiny home if it's on wheels, right? And so one of the attributes here is this allows somebody in an R2 unit, or R2 thing, to add a second rental, or get income from something else, but not up their property tax. So that is another aspect of this. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Right.
That's just an aspect of it.
It's less revenue for the town.
But I would say it creates affordable housing. I mean, when the property taxes go up, that cost gets passed on to
Yes,
whoever
absolutely.
is
It creates
using
lower
that
cost
property.
housing.
So that's why,
Yeah.
one of the goals actually,
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
relieve them of some of those expenses so that it remains more affordable.
But we've never addressed or found a way or gained any momentum towards keeping the cost reduced, like some kind of deed restriction or any type of the AMI or for actually low-cost housing rather than just market price, smaller housing.
So, in our meeting last week, we defined, it's legal, the term affordable housing does connotate deed restricted. So we actually changed the letter to lower cost because it is not deed restricted. But no, it's probably not feasible to do deed restricted in this scenario because you're talking about tiny homes and I don't even know if that system works on deed restriction with tiny homes. I mean, this is what, we're talking about novel regulations here. There's just a lot that hasn't been invented yet. So I don't think it's ready to go to the deed restriction. Thanks. You'd have to get Boulder County involved in a lot of other things.
It'd be hard to see how you could do a deed restriction on tiny homes. The ownership of the lot has to be the same in order to qualify as an ADU, so there'd be no separate deed per se for the tiny home. Really, it's an RV, which doesn't have a similar kind of property restrictions available to it, recording at the assessor's office. I don't know how you'd even accomplish that if you wanted to.
And we're not considering mobile homes, just
That's
tiny
right.
homes.
The tiny home ordinance requires that they look like a conventional home. Yes. That there is a design form in those regulations.
Any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Trustee Brown?
I think you already spoken to this, but my only question was really from looking at the map, any idea of how many R2 and R2A lots do not already have buildings on them, so that could potentially house tiny homes? It doesn't look like very many to me on the map. It's like a pretty small number.
And I haven't looked, it's certainly not a large number.
Well, maybe even less than the 10 maximum number of tiny homes.
Most likely, yeah. But, you know, since I've been involved with PCDC on different housing commissions, any housing you can get is a struggle. And so even if they're wins of 2 and 3, I think you have to take them, so.
In looking at this map, I mean, R2 is kind of pointless since it's counting, right? Is that what I'm looking at?
Counting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what R2 is upland
R2
county.
is residential multifamily.
Right, but that's, the map that we have, it shows it's Kelling Drive, which is obviously
Okay,
not
sorry, I thought you
level.
said county.
No. Then there's the R2A properties, which are Park and Evans, basically in Highway 7, Fifth Avenue. I know that those houses on Park and Evans, almost every single one of them have an ADU behind them already. And Highway 7 are all multifamily homes. So in all reality, to me, it seems like kind of a waste of time to put the zoning in there because there's nobody that can even put one on here. Especially with the fact that the Second Avenue Bridge is right there and that's gonna be compromised at some point. Gonna be ripped up and I don't know, I really don't see any reason to add that zoning at all.
I admit it's very small, it's one of the reasons it was overlooked. It is very small, but my understanding is there was a request out of somebody to do that.
Okay, interesting.
Trustee Farrell?
Basically, all of the easements and setbacks.
They all exist, yeah.
Excuse me?
They still exist.
They still exist and would
Yeah,
apply
yeah.
to the same.
Yeah.
So, personally, I don't see how, any reason to not include it if somebody really wants to do it. Especially since we haven't made a single application for one, and we're really trying to make this evolve.
Yeah, I guess I've kind of been trying to champion this as another, I mean, it may not be a lot, but I think it matters to whoever is successful. Every house matters, every unit matters when we've lost what we've lost, and we have not in any significant way successfully replaced very many units at this point. I mean, we have the 6 Habitat homes. I actually think our ADU ordinance has been pretty successful. In general, I mean, since we removed the fee barriers, we've had several go through even the special review process. So I think because this is a fairly minor change and shouldn't require a lot of time from the board or the staff, it seems like, you know, there are some potential locations here, I think, that could potentially take advantage of this, and there's clearly interest from the audience participation we had at the time when we did the tiny homes as well. So I'd be in favor of directing staff to bring us the ordinance. Any person, did you have anything you want to add? I think you're the only one that didn't comment. Did you want to add anything else?
Just to say, I'm supportive of this again, as Chairman Eddings said, we have to take the ones and twos given what we have available to us. So I'm supportive.
Anybody have a different opinion? Trustee Brown?
You know, I also support the recommendation of the PCDC and staff. I think they did a good, quick job of reviewing it, and thank you for your recommendation and for the reasons set forth in their letter. I think it's something we should take a shot at, whether it has a 1 or 2 lot impact. Even if we do that, it's something better than what we are, where we are now. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay, Trustee Roberts, you didn't really give an opinion one way or the other, did you?
I could,
Go ahead.
yeah. I guess I feel like it doesn't probably make any difference. I feel very doubtful that anyone will, I mean, I don't, is someone that owns an R2 or R2A property requested this?
So, I understand Tad has been speaking to somebody, and then I know one other person, is it appropriate for me to name names though?
No, it's
No,
allowed.
I'm not going to.
I mean, okay, because like Trustee Miller said, that it's hard to imagine an R2 property that's flat that doesn't already have maybe U, whereas the assertion that there aren't appropriate, there's hundreds of flat R1 lots. So, in any case, my only apprehension really is that like we've just changed our zoning so many times in the last few years, and it takes a quasi judicial act to rezone a property. It takes an ordinance to change the entire zone, and we've done it many times. We haven't had a comp plan update since 10 years ago, and it feels like we just are sort of rushing through many changes in zoning, and we haven't taken a lot of time to see what the outcome's gonna be. And when we have had, no applications for tiny homes that we already approved, it seems unlikely to make a difference. But like I said, I just feel uncomfortable with how often we've modified the meaning of our zones.
And just to clarify, Trustee Roberts, this would be a text change, not a zoning change.
Well, it's a land use change.
We're not doing a rezoning, we're just doing
I
a text
understand,
amendment.
we're changing what the description of the zone is.
That's fine, I just wanna make sure we're not going
No,
through,
we-
we're not going through a zoning
Right.
process, right? I don't wanna trigger any of
I
that.
was making the point
Okay.
that it's a big deal to change the zone of one property, but it's been really easy for us to change the definition of the zone for everybody, right? Because we've done it a number of times in the last, say, 6 years.
Just point of clarification, I think the PCDC did put a thoughtful condition in there that it limits this to lots that don't already have something on there, so we're really not increasing the density of any particular zone by making
That's
this
true,
change.
yeah, I agree.
Trustee Miller?
Just for the record, I still hold huge issue with the fact that these are only tiny homes that we're talking about instead of mobile homes, which actually have building code attached to them that can be made to look like a home. And RVs, because RVs are, that's what a tiny home is. And so I really hold issue with that fact. That's all I have to say. It makes me crazy that tiny homes are the only thing that is allowed.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So, there's empathy for that argument, absolutely. The design forms that you put on these structures probably will increase the monthly cost to $100 a month. And that's someone's grocery bill. That's a dental appointment, that's real money to people. And so when you put this on, that was fully understood by the PCDC. It just, I think the overriding feeling was people weren't ready to have RVs in backyards. They just weren't ready for that, and that's, and also.
Mobile homes.
Or mobile homes in backyards, I just don't think people were ready for that. And the other thing is, we rarely invent anything new here, we just pretty much copy everybody else's. All we do is research and copy. And largely, we did what was the national standard. But I fully understand.
So I think there was a majority of the board that was willing to give the direction to proceed. Since you're here and we don't see you often, I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your leadership in PCDC. PCDC does really great work and has been under your leadership, so thanks for being here tonight and for everything you're doing. So, appreciate the work.
It is a great group of commissioners right now. It is really, I really appreciate who you guys have sought out and put on it. They're very, very objective. Much, I don't want to say anything about the past, but just really good objective. I can talk about it, but they're really objective. So I really like working on it.
Great, thank you so much. Great. Okay, next item on the agenda is regarding the FEMA PAP. Turn it back over to staff.
All right, good evening. I'm here to give an update on the PAP budget and hopefully hopefully receive some direction on how to move forward. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to mention that I did hear from FEMA last week that they should be approving the second Avenue Bridge early this week. So, they'll be, and it had nothing to do with our visit. Yeah, so anyway, so we should be hearing something this week and we'll have approval to move forward with design and, hopefully go out to construction.
What's design?
We have
More
30% design,
Oh, we're only
finished
30?
design. Mhm. Yeah, no, the way it works is you don't wanna incur any more costs because if they don't approve it, those costs are not reimbursable, so we gave them a 30%. So.
Great.
Okay, so I had drafted up a memo and hopefully it helped, explain. I just gave a little background on what the pilot is and what the PAP is. So normally, when you have a FEMA project, they fund for you to put things back the way they were pre-flood. And if it goes beyond the scope or the budget of what they estimated, when you close that project out, you can ask for additional funds if you can show that they were reasonable and necessary. However, when you decide to participate in the PAP or the pilot program that FEMA has, that budget is capped. So at the end, if you go out of scope, out of budget, that's on the sub-grantee or the grantee to cover the additional funds. So we're capped at $21,497,351. So currently, we are not over budget, but with projecting what we have remaining in contracts and projects to complete, which would be the Ped Bridge at Third and Park, and then the paving and the guardrail and the retaining wall at Fourth and Evans, and some additional employee expenses, that's putting us a little over $744,000 over budget. The Ped Bridge originally was estimated at Third and Park was going to be about $300,000 was the estimate. I got an updated opinion of cost from the engineer that we have, the consultant engineer, and the construction alone is $618,000. Because in order to get the bridge out of, to show no rise and get out of the floodway, we need a 200-foot bridge there. So the cost of that bridge is just almost not feasible. And then the Fourth and Evans, the paving and the retaining wall, I feel like that's something that we really need to finish, and because CDBG would not fund that because it's in the floodway. So, and currently that is out to bid, but it's not too late to, not move forward with it if we decide that. And currently, all this work, the scope of the pilot program needs to be completed by December of this year. So we have a short window to complete what's left in the scope. If we take the bridge out of the Third and Park Bridge out of the pilot, our budget now is projected to be like $114,000 over. And I did sit down with the finance director, and she felt that we had enough funds in the Conservation Trust Fund to cover that if we needed to. I also have a little contingency built in here with labor, because we had budgeted employees doing recovery work in the beginning. I have not asked for reimbursement for that, and we could choose not to ask for reimbursement, but it's calculated to expenses, so that's about another $100,000 as well. The other things to consider is that this could go up or down, because if we go over on some contracts or go under on some contracts, it does adjust what your costs are going to be and where you're going to come in with your projects. And we're trying to do some cost savings by trying to get some donated material for the retaining walls required for the skate park. We know that Lions Valley River Park's gonna come in under their contract amount, so that's gonna help out. But at the same time, the Bone Park contract, I think we're gonna be over on that because there's just change orders that are starting to come in, such as additional lighting or lighting
for the skate park, which is about 28,000, so that's something we would like direction on. The walkways coming up to the ball fields were bid as crusher fine instead of concrete, which is a little more of a maintenance issue. But it'll cost an additional 36,000 to put the concrete in place of the crusher fine. And then the electrical connection to the pump house was left out of the bid. And so we got an estimate for that, and that's probably gonna be another 28,000, which is something I'm not sure that you can forego, because that's, going to be powering our irrigation system for Bone Park. So, and there's other smaller change orders coming in, but none of them that are, it wasn't the fault of the contractor, I'd like to say, but. So hopefully that wasn't too quick or too much. Yeah, it's a lot of information, so.
Any questions, trustee Federle?
I think he's first. Did you want to go first?
The light comes on.
No? Oh, okay, super. So, the safe routes to school, you mentioned something there, but I wanted to get some clarification. Was that only going to be granted if it was both bridges?
No,
So it would go towards Fourth and Evans if we were to.
that's the only one that goes through.
It is the only one.
Yes, so I forgot to clarify that. So now, seeing the expenses that are coming in for Third and Park, we would like to look at and evaluate the scope and the funding that we have for Fourth and Evans. And because you have to complete your scope of work if you accept that grant. And so, we really need some modeling done in that area to determine what size bridge we need. And then I think we could come up with a better estimate of what's gonna cost putting that bridge, and also the safe routes includes sidewalks, bike trails, paths. It's a little more encompassing than just the bridge.
And doesn't that also encompass, for that curve, the retaining wall and the street? But nonetheless, from a design standpoint, they need to come together at the same time.
It's just not going to be possible. The FEMA money's running out at the end of the year, so we really have to do that now.
So
And
the
then
street part, and it
They're
has,
keeping it in mind as they design.
we are as much as we can, but, it's just, we have to stay within the FEMA scope and environmental clearance that we have too. And then, and then the safe routes, we really have till 2021 to complete that project. We have time, but we haven't formally accepted that grant either, on the basis that we wanna make sure we can complete this scope of work, or maybe look into some additional funding. We just wanna ensure that we're, prepared and have all the funding in place in order to complete that project, but we know how critical it is too.
okay. So I asked some people from Parks and Rec about lights at the skate park, and that seemed like a surprise to them. I'd heard about lights at the ball fields. So I didn't know, did they get to have any input on where they would go prioritize the funds to go towards, or, if we needed to cut back somewhere, where they would recommend it to be?
I would have to talk to the director of parks, cause he interfaces with that group, and I can ask if that's what the board would like, we can take that direction and involve them more in that decision. As far as the lights at the ball fields, we are putting in conduit, but we don't have the funding to put the lights in there either. But I think there's been some discussion, maybe possibly looking at the kind of conservation trust funds for that. But I think that's just been, an idea. Same with the skate park, we could put the conduit in and get the lighting in later. So there's options there, and if you would like us to consult with that board, we can do that.
Well, one of the pieces of feedback that I got was, and it really makes sense to me unless somebody comes up with a different perspective, is that, ball fields, you get to lease out for games, and games can run into the evening. You're not really gonna have that on a regular basis for a skate park, although I know my son love it. But, so, I feel like, I got the impression from them, they would rather see lights at a ball field, because then it could help generate
funding or programs and then leasing and raising money, you know, that can go towards the town. But I guess a part of me felt like I would really wanna hear from them, their wishes, before I assumed what they would want. So I kind of would like, in a way, the cart might be before the horse until they've had a potential chance to weigh in on this.
But there's no funding for either.
I understand, but
So-
if this is going, if we're talking about PAP and it going over or something, and they're wanting to make a distinction between a pump house, which probably is really important, versus walkways, I think they should have some voice in that before, I feel like we can.
But I wanted direction from the board if you wanted to do that.
And if you're willing to go that much over budget, because then the town needs to find a way to cover those funds. So I think even if they make the decision they would like lighting at both, that also means the town has to figure out how to cover lighting at both the ball field and the skate park. So I think that's also kind of the question too. So, I mean, if we wanna get direction from them and come back to the board and say, okay, it looks like we might be this much over budget, is this acceptable, and are we willing to use set aside or something? You know, I don't know what the options are, but.
Yeah, I think they need to be more involved in the discussion, I think, at this point. That's my feeling.
Any other comments, trustee Miller?
I just have a question about the Safe Routes to School grant, if we were to accept it, and the Fourth Avenue Bridge. Since it's not FEMA funds, does that mean that we don't have to make it like that giant ADA accessible thing?
Safe Routes is also federal funding.
It is, okay, that's what I was curious about, if it was gonna be that same, big design problem.
Trustee Bennett?
I would echo what Trustee Farrell said about if you have to prioritize between lighting the skate park and lighting the ball fields, even I know that neither one of them is funded. The Conservation Trust Fund money, if you're talking about dipping into that for some of these costs, you're gonna need to think about some priorities of concrete walkways versus ball field lights versus skate park lights. And just thinking back to the way things were in the park on the one lighted field before the flood, my impression was there were a lot of people that came out for the Monday night, you know, beer league, like it's not beer league, because beer's not out of the park, Monday night rec league, softball games. And then you have all the youth softball practices that use them, and particularly in the winter hours, it's hard to squeeze in softball practices between the end of school and dark. And so, I don't know, I agree that getting direction from the park, sometimes their priorities would be better, but I guess my further direction would be for them to request them to look carefully at the number of anticipated users of how many nighttime skate park usage you have versus how many after hours softball practices and adult nights and everything. My impression, I could be wrong, I may have different figures, would be that you would probably get more people using lighted ball fields than you would a lighted skate park. And I didn't, one clarifying question, in the memo, it looked like you were talking about concrete dugouts, but you said concrete walkways or pressure fine.
It includes the dugouts as well. So right now, the dugouts are dirt or same as the infield. And so there was concern that they're just gonna wear down eventually, and it's just, so it's more of a maintenance concern.
Would it also be walkways?
And then there's walkways coming up, and there's like a hub, you know, of the ball fields, and so, yeah, so there would be.
I think there's a lot of pressure fine walkways and bikeways and so forth in Glen Park, so I don't see why pressure fine wouldn't work for walkways. For the concrete, for the dugouts, in the old days, that would be a community project where a bunch of guys would get a bunch of concrete in a mixer and go out there and fix them one day. And so I think that's probably something that's doable in the future, and I'm not sure that concreting either the walkways or the dugouts right now is necessary. If the dugouts become a problem, we'll organize a crew to go pour some concrete. We've done it before, right, Marty? Okay.
I want to mention, I don't have a cost to put the lighting in for the ball fields, because currently that is not in the contract to do that. So it's, to me, all a matter of like, how much are we willing to feel comfortable going over budget to.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, what direction exactly are you looking for?
I do, we would like direction on these items that were not within the scope, which is the lighting for both ball fields and the skate park. Do we do them now, do we wait till later? Do we just do one? And then the crusher fine, it was in the original scope to do the concrete, it was just inadvertently bid as crusher fine, but again, that's additional funds. And yet we still have a ways to go on the project, so there may be other things coming in, but more direction on the outer scope work and I guess going, dipping into those conservation funds or willing to do set aside and budget.
Which we're already over without doing any of them, correct?
Yes.
I understand. Mayor Person.
Yeah, it feels like we've been on this very long flight with grants. It started several years ago. Takeoff was, got in the air, moved along faster, slower, but I'd ask our town attorney and aviation specialist what the most critical part of any flight is.
Takeoffs are optional, but landings are mandatory, is what the pilot said, so I would say landings.
Exactly. And so I feel like we're coming in for a landing, and so we have to be, this is when we have to be the most careful. And to me, we should, and just my personal opinion is we should be erring on the conservative side, so that we're not risking, either planning for, engaging, or risking town obligated expenses. And so, I think that's the default. And if, unless there's something that we think would be, an excitement factor or something, bring people to town.
Trustee Roberts.
Everybody's gonna cut their own view of what's missing from the flood, and for me, and I think maybe a number of others, the 4W bridge, it seems like just a really significant piece that's still missing, and I think it seems pretty obvious from your letter that the third bridge is just not feasible, in my view. I suppose we're gonna give that direction that you've asked for, but there's a question I have about the funding for the fourth. There's probably a rumor or whatever that's kicked around for a while, and it'd be nice to understand that we've gotten an insurance payment to replace that bridge or not.
We did, but you have to, FEMA requires you to keep those funds within the FEMA projects and scope of work. So we cannot divert the insurance funds to that bridge unless that bridge was built under the FEMA program. Even though it's not their funding, it's a requirement of FEMA that all the insurance proceeds that you receive from the flood gets applied to FEMA projects first.
Okay, but what does that mean? That
That
money was
means-
spent elsewhere?
Yeah,
Okay.
it stays in the pilot
Mhm.
and it's applied into the pilot program and any of those projects in the pilot. But we can't extract that out and apply it to the Fourth and
Right.
Evans Bridge unless the Fourth and Evans Bridge was in the scope of the FEMA project,
Mhm.
which we could put it in there, but again, we would be over budgeted still. And it wouldn't include the sidewalks and the bike trails and
So
such.
to some degree, we've been reimbursed for
The bridge.
the bridge,
Just the bridge.
so we can't build the bridge with that money, and, yep, so, and it's, I understand you.
Yeah.
I don't yet really grasp what our decision is tonight.
I really feel like there's not much of a
Okay.
decision to make here.
Right.
And that's just the way I'm looking at it, is
Yeah.
that the money is just, with the cost of what it would take to put the bridge at Third, which when we first looked at this, actually seemed less expensive than Fourth, which is why we went the direction we did anyway, and felt that it might be even more feasible from a construction standpoint. It hasn't panned out. I would concur with Trustee Browning's statement that I think this is a really big hole for the community to not have a connection over the river in that area. So I'm hoping that safe routes will kind of come through on Fourth, although I'm really worried we're gonna run into the same problem. And we already know what a challenge we were facing, which is also another reason we diverted this. So I would just hope that we would continue to focus on that project and find out where we stand quickly, because I feel like the community is kind of looking for answers, and we need to be straight with people about our chances of getting a bridge back. So the reality is that we've got to build it to different standards today, and it could take more money and more time than what we have.
Yes. So I would like to request some direction on the Third and Park Bridge, because if we want to move forward with it, we have to get it designed and constructed in the next few months. Like, time is limited.
Where would the funds come from?
No, she's just saying she wants you to take it off of the plate.
I'm saying, but I feel like it's kind
Formally.
of off. Okay, so
But again,
the direction.
is the board okay with
Just
us?
hear the board nod their head on
Yes.
saying we don't have $600,000 right now.
But the Fourth and Evans is definitely a priority and a focus, and we want to get that modeling completed so that we know what we need there, and then we can pursue next steps if it's additional funding, or I don't know if we can go back to CDOT and say, this is the new updated new cost. I don't know, but we definitely will look at every single option.
Yeah, I think there's probably some other funding potentially out there, even through Dr. Cog potentially.
The Lions Community Foundation is actually
The fa-
interesting.
Yeah,
And
I
do a
mean, we may
separate
have to
foundation.
piece it together,
Yeah.
but I think there could be,
Yeah.
there are probably other funding sources for a project like that. more
I think
so
we're
than
just more
some of the
concerned
others.
now with when the bids came in,
Okay.
so.
Trustee Miller, and then.
Yeah, well, I just have a question about, would it be possible to, I mean, I don't know how much the Fourth Avenue Bridge is gonna cost. Probably even more than 600,000 now, maybe, potentially?
Potentially, yes.
So, is it a possibility to ask Safe Routes to fund the Third Avenue Bridge
I mean,
instead?
it's crossed my mind, it's a possibility, we could reach out to them and let them know we have additional, we have more
Right.
data there. And can we shift those funds over to that location? So that's a possibility, we can reach out to them, we haven't signed the IGA with them, so we could possibly change the scope, I don't know. I haven't worked with that funding source before, but I'd be willing to look into it.
I mean, I feel like, and how much were we granted? Wasn't it like,
Half
yeah, that's what I
million.
thought.
Mhm.
So that's really close to
Yeah.
what we need
Mhm.
to make it happen.
Yes.
Well, that's just the bridge.
Right.
If we take the
but
safe routes, we have to do the rest.
LCF could potentially throw in some money and.
I think they're interested in the bridge, like maybe fundraising for planks.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying if we could shift the funding to the Third Avenue Bridge from Safe Routes to school, and we didn't have quite enough, and LCF could throw a fundraiser or whatever, and we could raise the other 150,000 between everybody in town that wants a bridge, then maybe we can make it work. I don't know, I just feel like,
I think definitely we can look into both options, because I have a feeling with the Third and Park, they're gonna want some trail system there. It's not just the bridge for their requirements, but it may be more feasible to do that than the other, but
it's
right now,
flat,
yeah.
you know, pressure fine, flat
Mhm.
path.
If it meets ADA.
Would the timing work out for that, knowing?
If it's safe routes, yes, because safe routes,
That's 2
we
years.
have till 2021.
But with the PAP, I mean, if that project is staying and a portion of it is coming from the PAP.
We would take it out.
Oh,
We
you
would still just take, I think we would just take it out.
So we wouldn't have any portion of it at all covered for, so, okay.
I mean, we don't really even have the money in there
Okay.
to spend anyway, so it doesn't benefit. I thought about that too, about asking for an extension for the pilot, but it's like, well, we don't have the
Yeah,
money
right.
anyway, it doesn't benefit us.
But we can version it out, so we don't have to.
Yes.
And then in regard to lights, is there any interest in putting the conduit under the ground now while they're putting in the irrigation? Or both, or one or the other?
What's the approximate cost of the
On
conduit?
conduit?
I did not, so the conduit for the ball fields is already in the bid, and I do not recall what it is, I'd have to look. But the conduit for the skate park is not in there, so I don't know what that would be
So when they bid the project, it's already there, the conduit?
for the ball fields.
For the ball field, so it'd only be the conduit for the skate park we'd be adding.
Adding.
Trustee Farrell?
Well, it would certainly make a lot of sense to have that there now while the construction is taking place. So I think that for future, that makes a lot of sense to do now.
Yeah, it's gonna be cheaper now.
Exactly.
So
that
it seems like
seems-
even for some security purposes.
And
we
then,
don't want-
yeah, in the future, we could add lights to the skate park if, you know, it seems like that's a good idea.
Okay, is that a nod?
Everybody agree with that? Conduit, assuming probably not a.
And then we do need to do the electric to the pump house.
Yes.
Is that all your items? Oh, crusher fine versus concrete
Yeah,
pads.
that's the other one.
The only concern from the parks director was the crusher fine next to the ball fields could create some maintenance issues with the crusher fines going into the fields for mowing and stuff, you know. But,
Long-term wear and tear, you know, conflicts.
yeah, but we understand your perspective.
Trustee Barry?
I just wanna make sure I expressed his concern about that.
My personal direction on that would be go with the crusher fine for now. Both the concrete walkways and dugouts and skate park lighting would be great to have, but I don't see them as essential. And I agree with Trustee Drysdale, we ought to be conservative here. I do think we ought to focus our priorities on the Fourth Avenue Bridge to replace what was lost. If you look at the downtown plans and connecting downtown with the confluence and everything, that's a key part of our downtown master plan, and so I really think that's where the priorities belong. And finally, I meant to say this earlier, we had a workshop on the PAC plan at one time, and you explained the difficulties in coming in under budget or over budget. Either one of them created problems. And if I did my math right, if at the moment, I know it could change, if we're at 114,000 potentially over out of a $21.5 million overall budget, that is 0.5%. And that's landing the plane pretty close on target. And congratulations on getting us even to that position, because I know that wasn't easy to do.
One last
Go ahead,
comment.
Trustee Barry.
So I just, since you expressed that about the ball fields, crusher fine on a skate park is also detrimental to anyone actually on a skateboard in terms of creating danger and crashes. So as much as I agree, I think that perhaps it might want to consider a little bit of a sidewalk before you get to the skate park, because that really is a potential liability issue. Just saying. I don't know. Something to consider.
Probably covered under the town's governmental immunity, but as a former skateboarder, I can agree that any sort of little pebble is a big deal with crashing, so.
And I'm not sure how close the path is to,
I don't know.
and I don't know what they have coming up to the skate park either, but we can look at that and consider that as well.
Okay.
So, I mean, when it comes to the concrete, we can come back to that. Well, although I think they need a decision really soon because they need it, I think they're saying.
I think they're saying, what I've heard is, we wanna be conservative and make sure we don't overshoot the runway. Keep the kind of, what do you call it? But the direction is that, we're gonna have to look elsewhere for the bridge. And no lights or additions at this point, except for the conduits and the small things that you mentioned.
Okay.
But you could keep us posted if anything changes, bring it back.
And the next flood recovery update, I'll have an updated cap budget. I've been updating it every month, but just things are getting right down to we're putting the landing gear out. We're getting close.
Headlines.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thanks. All right, so next is, we don't have any items removed from consent, so trustee reports. Trustee Jones?
I missed the notice that the EDC is meeting, I just saw it on the calendar today on the 18th, 8:30 right here. And that's all I know, we haven't had a meeting since the last Board of Trustees meeting. And I would note that, I believe a month ago, Trustee Drysdale, and then 2 weeks ago, Trustee Browning requested that we have a discussion about the Lake McIntosh shares. And I'll also request that at this point, perhaps we could go ahead and put it on the agenda for a discussion and not to decide to have discussion next time.
I think it was just a matter of when staff was prepared.
Because
We
Longmont
need a
hadn't
policy and we
Right.
had a.
Just wanted to add my voice to that
Sure,
request.
sure. It's on the, in the queue for when it's ready to move forward.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Trustee Bird?
So, the Bella renewal that was budgeted last year, I believe is completed. And they're ready to deliver it to the town. We don't have a landing place because originally the goal was thinking that we would be able to put it with one of the pedestrian bridges. And so with it all kind of being a little bit up in the air, we do have a place to store the bell. Although since we've invested all of this time and it's really incredible, we're trying to think about an alternative place, whether it's a temporary or could be another permanent alternative location. But it's gonna be in town very soon and being stored, but we would, probably will be coming in, and Arts and Humanities Commission will probably want some direction as to, do you all approve this spot that maybe wasn't initially in the plans? So that's kind of coming down.
Who will make that decision?
Yeah, I'm not sure, and obviously that would affect parks too, in terms of potential placement.
So it could go potentially in the 100-year floodplain, depending on its base. Cannot go in the floodway.
So maybe I could get clarification of what that means.
Sure.
And I can talk to you offline on that, which probably is a better idea.
You can brainstorm some.
Yeah, but just know that it's almost here.
And generally, that kind of decision has really just been worked out with staff and the LHC to try to find out,
Okay.
here's the kind of space that we need for this piece, and then
Right.
staff work with them to figure that out.
To make it happen.
That it needs to come.
Okay, super. All right, well, thank you.
You gotta go by the stage in Sandstone
Okay.
because of the memory associated with that.
Oh, that's a.
I'm gonna make that recommendation.
Well, the PCDC agenda was pretty much covered between staff report and adjournment meeting. I did want to sort of reiterate the point about that how important the bridge is. That really is something that, it's been, kind of almost divisive and, a lot of disappointment and that sort of thing associated with it. So, having the Fourth Avenue Bridge some way, somehow, or some representation of how we could, just how, even if it's a plan that maybe a couple of years out, that'd be better than nobody knowing what's gonna happen. Also today, just from a nostalgia perspective, I happened to witness the bridge that went into Bum Park being hauled away from the wastewater treatment plant. And it was, I remember seeing the other bridge being hauled away. It was all crumpled up. But this is, I guess it's still in good enough shape, somebody could use it.
It just can't be for public use, just private.
Amusement park. Okay, And the only other thing I have is related to street lighting. I've heard a few people comment that some of the street lighting, I guess, that's been installed in the last year or so is very bright and it shines directly in the windows and, you know, it's new and irritating to me. So I don't know what, you know, what could be done if there's some kind of shrouding or something that could be considered or looked at. That's all.
Trustee Burton?
Yes, I would kind of echo what Trustee Drosted said about the Bell of Renewal somewhere in Sandstone Park. Maybe in fact, there's a concrete square there in Sandstone Park that I've always wondered what it was there for. There's nothing sitting on it. It would be better as green space. It's going to stay concrete. I don't know what the size is compared to the Bell, but I think someplace visible and not in the floodplain is good. Anyway, it's not 2 cents worth. Sustainability Futures Commission met on September 12th. They're working on the Sustainability Action Plan updates and are in the process of checking with the main other boards and commissions that would be affected by things that have been in the plan, like the UEB and the Planning Commission. They've been in the process of meeting with those, and so they're getting input from the other boards and commissions before they finalize the plan. The meeting on the 12th was the day before the proposals were due back on the pay-as-you-throw program, so they couldn't review those, but the SFC may have a special meeting once those proposals, I'm not sure what the response was.
I heard we received 2.
They did receive 2, okay. So I think that they're planning a special meeting to sit down with the sustainability coordinator and review those and try to make recommendations and comments to the board, because it may have changed. I think that was, I read somewhere that it was going to go on our October 7th agenda, and so that could change. If so, we need to let the SFC know, because they're going to try to have a special meeting before October 7th so they could have input on those proposals. If it gets pushed off, what their regular meeting would suffice to review the proposals, we need to let them know. So anyway, they're still involved in that process.
Okay, Trustee Miller?
Housing and Human Services, Z-Trip came to speak with us about the $25,000 grant from Boulder County that they are granting us for transportation fill-in for the lack of midday bus service that we have. Z-Trip would be the ones who would provide that service, and they brought vouchers to show us kind of like how they would work, and they stated that the hours of operation would have to be outside of the scheduled bus times, because they don't want the ridership to dwindle for the bus routes. That's the biggest thing. So it would be, you know, between like 9 and 4, 9 and 3:30, something like that, 8:30 and 3:30, that people could use these vouchers to go to their doctor's appointments or to the grocery store or something like this. These funds are to be used in 2020, so we have a few months to get everything in order, which Z-Trip is helping facilitate that, as well as Boulder County. You can also take somebody with you if you need help getting in and out of the vehicle, if you're disabled, or something like that, for an additional $1, which they can also charge on the voucher. So we're just trying to figure out details on how to A, get the word out, B, how to allocate the funds to, do you give each household a certain amount of vouchers, or do you give them a $1 amount, or do you know, how to make it so that people don't abuse it. So sort of thing. And if the if it has to be in the town boundaries, or if they'll go into, like say up the canyon toward Pinewood, or up Highway 7. So those are kind of some of the things that we're working out. There's also a volunteer driver planning group, which is happening, and has been the Intermountain communities that have gotten together for several months now to try and figure out volunteer driver system. And they're also making good headway, so good stuff coming. It's for senior and disabled only, and they are looking at March to start that program between Allen's Park and Netherland and here, like all the mountain communities. So, and we don't have a whole lot of details about that yet and how it would work, but yeah, I think they have another meeting coming up next month with all the mountain communities to nail some more stuff down. So that was a good meeting, yeah.
All right, so the students met last Sunday and had their second meeting, so they're rolling along pretty well now at this point. They seem like kind of old pros, actually. I can't remember if I appointed Chloe Elves at the last meeting.
You did.
I did, okay. I remember talking about the student commission, but I don't remember if I actually made the appointment. I meant to tell you, she's a non-voting member of that commission.
Non-voting.
I did get an application for the Economic Vitality Commission from Chris Wynn. So I'd like to, if the board doesn't object, go ahead and appoint him. Didn't really have a board and commission typical presentation, so if I could do it now, that'd be great.
What was the last name?
Chris Winyat, and I'll get you the application, came over the board and commission electronic. So the students didn't make any decisions, but I did have a question for the attorney about, and just to do some research on, is there any limitations on what a statutory town can do if they were interested in making a recommendation to the board to raise the age of purchasing vaping products locally? You don't have to answer me off the top of your head, but
Yeah.
I'd like to give them some, I wanna know
Okay.
before I
We
have
can
them
create-
talk about it even more, but
I'll make some notes to look into that.
that would be great. They're also talking about the flavor bans. The FDA may take care of all of this federally before we get to it, but it's giving them some good practice, how you go about researching these things and thinking it through. They didn't bring up anything new. They were missing a couple members, so they didn't want to make decisions until they had a full group. But they did a really good job. So I did not attend the Parks and Rec Commission. I was out of town. I know they are working on a pedestrian walking map, and I saw some progress on that. We do have a Dr. Cog meeting tomorrow night, so I'll be attending that. They generally review things that are going on at the state legislature. It does sound like there's going to be a Tabor vote on the November ballot to potentially try to repeal Tabor. I don't know if you have any information you'd want to share.
I don't have any information at this point, but I can definitely make a note to talk to CML next time I see him.
Maybe get the rundown from CML for the board, just on what's CML's recommendation. I haven't seen any of the language at this point, but they should have an update tomorrow night, so I can bring some of that up for the board to consider if we wanted to take any position locally. We often will pass a resolution in support of state issues.
We
if
did
want
so
to.
last election.
We did it
Yeah.
last time. There were a couple things on the ballot. So we don't have anything ourselves, I don't believe we're gonna have anything on the November ballot, correct?
No, I don't think so. I think the direction from the board was.
We decided not to.
We decided not to,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we were gonna wait until April potentially to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I have. So if you have any action items you'd like to review?
We need to add the discussion on Lake Macintosh shares, talk with LHC regarding a location for the bill of renewal, talk with our electric provider on
the ability to retrofit LED lights, schedule pay-as-you-throw, in conjunction with SFC. Check in with CML regarding any information they have on Tabor repeal, and then work on the amendment to the ordinance regarding R2A and tiny homes, and then we move forward with the direction you gave us on the PAP budget.
One more thing.
Trustee Brown?
I'd like to remind you to address that their financial reports are due 7 days following the conclusion of their festivals.
And of course, they have the research raising vaping product page, so.
Yep.
Yeah. You want to look at flavor bans as well, it sounds like?
Yeah, those are the two things that they're
And
most
and this would be
focused on.
just for vaping, not for smoking generally?
Just for vaping.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session, please.
I'll move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS section 246424B for the purpose of receiving legal advice from attorneys representing the town regarding the MOA with Lyons Properties and the town's legal complaint against Lyons Properties of Boulder County Court.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion?
You could second.
Okay, call for the vote. And I need everyone to vote, please.
You want me to vote too?
You can still vote to go into executive session, you can just review yourself. Okay, so it carries 6-0, thank you. Trustee Miller?
I am recusing myself due to conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you.